Welcome to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered with Perry Clark. This program looks at mental health from unique perspectives and shows you how to manage your life by finding the knots that help you and stay away from the ones that could be a disadvantage. Now, here is your host, Perry Clark.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. So it's time for our next installment, and if I'm looking at my calendar correctly, this will be the recording we end the year with. So we'll be looking at 2022 for our next set of recordings. But for our recordings today, we're going to go ahead and focus with what we've got here. But, of course, the business end of this is making sure that everyone knows that this is not a substitute for a therapeutic relationship. And I do strongly recommend that you seek out a therapist in your area to work on your unique issues. This is for purposes of entertainment and education. So today we're going to be talking with another fellow I met during the brain spotting training back in December of 2019, before the world all locked down on us, who's going to talk about a very interesting field that also relates to the aspects of trauma and our recovery from it, which is part of why we all studied brain spotting as well. So today we're going to be talking with Alexis Overstreet, who is a master social worker, licensed clinical social worker, and licensed clinical addiction specialist, and the proprietor of Metaspace Counseling. And I'll let them tell you where they are located, because I just remembered that's not in our information here. But otherwise, Alexis is also a certified Brainspotter practitioner and consultant, also trained in internal family systems, or IFS, and is trained in trauma and tension release exercises. Her focus of her practice is on healing trauma from the bottom up, or the brain to a bottom up brain approach, interpersonal, neurobiological, and focusing on the brain-body functions. Currently, she focuses her practice on women of color who are struggling with cultural and transitional trauma, as well as older individuals who are struggling to find purpose after the life transitions of going into retirement. Then a bunch of her work that she's been doing with the TRE, which is the trauma release and exercises, is working on the pandemic stress that we're all living with right now, and providing more self-regulation for therapists and other people who are seeking it. So welcome, Alexis, to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered.
Thank you. It is wonderful to be here, and I so appreciate your invite. Yeah.
Not a problem. Glad I could do it. So tell everyone how you got started in this work to begin with.
How I got started in therapy. I was working for, my undergrad is in sociology. So I'm a sociologist at heart. And so I'm very interested in institutions and how those institutions affect us and impact us. And I was working in education for a curriculum and marketing company, and definitely affecting change, working with the institution of education and working in Title I schools with a particular curricula. And at a certain point, it just wasn't doing enough for me. I wanted to affect change. And so I was, definitely in kind of this macro space, if you will. And I wanted to do some different work, and I couldn't figure out what it is that I wanted to do. And I was, driving to work one day and heard an advertisement for my alma mater, and they were recruiting for graduate school for social work. And I thought, okay, this is just a natural segue for me. And I started that process. And because I was a macro kind of perspective, I stayed in macro. And all of a sudden, like right in the midway through graduate school, I decided to approach macro from a very direct perspective. And so I decided to go into addictions work, because that was just kind of my background with my father and some of his work. And from there, it's been all history. Yeah. So that's kind of how I got into it, in general. and doing the work specifically that I'm doing now, which is really focused in trauma, because I had not initially thought that I would work with trauma. I was actually just a little bit afraid of it because I didn't know anything about trauma. But as I did more work, and as you probably know, like, we can't really do this work and not work with trauma, especially with all of the, research that is like happening right now, and everything we're finding out about the brain and the nervous system. It's just, really natural for us to be, to have some of that trauma informed work. So how I got more naturally into this is noticing that and not really being able to have or not having the tools for my patients and the folks that I was working with. So that led me to a lot of the approaches that I work with, which is interpersonal neurobiology, of course, brain spotting. Interpersonal neurobiology is really an umbrella, but brain spotting, internal family systems, and what we'll be talking about today, which is TRE, and also MELT method, which we talked a little bit about, you and I previously. So that's kind of the long, short story of how I got into this. Yeah.
Gotcha. And especially, we're going to be talking today about the TRE method, which is the tension and trauma releasing exercise, and especially dealing with pandemic stress. Because as much as some would, and depending on where you are in the world listening to this, the pandemic is still going on.
It is definitely. It's here. Yeah.
And even if you right now, if we're here us in the US, some people don't seem to be acting like the pandemic's going on, but the impact that that 2020 had on us is still here, and we're probably going to be seeing a long-term impact of what that did for everyone's psychological health.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was, talking with someone, I guess it probably was this weekend, and, just talking about the impact of the pandemic. And I said, actually, this is 2 years, like, because I remember, you and I met in, what was it, December 2019.
Yep. And
I remember them talking about the happenings of this virus starting in October, October, November of 2019. And so the world has been vibrating in this virus, and the temperature of that has been around for 24 months. And yes, some of us are acting like it's not here, but best believe our nervous systems know. Our nervous systems know. So, yeah.
So tell us a bit more about TRE.
Yeah, well, TRE is an intervention. TRE itself is an acronym that stands for tension and trauma release exercises. And it was created by a social worker. Love to support my social workers, Dr. David Berselli. And it's basically a set of 7 exercises that stretch and fatigue the muscles so that the body can get to a natural, spontaneous movement of releasing stress, trauma, overwhelm that happens in the body from a day-to-day, just kind of stressors that we experience, or kind of those major events that we may have that causes overwhelm or trauma to settle in our body. And so that's kind of in a nutshell of what TRE is. And I like to explain it in a way, just because of the pandemic is here, we're all a little bit more aware about trauma. And so more people are more informed around about the, the stress cycle, fight, flight, and freeze. More people are kind of familiar with that. And we call that the stress response, right? TRE, it helps with the recovery response of the system. And so it's so important for everyone to know, just like our body is built and our nervous system is built to respond to stress, our nervous system is also built to recover from that stress. We often don't allow that to happen just because of, pathology of tremoring and fear and all of that comes with it. So in a nutshell, that's what TRE is. Yeah, it's an intervention to encourage and invite the natural and spontaneous tremor that we have in our body in order to discharge like stuck stress from the body.
All right. So how do you use it with your clients?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I like to start off with how do I use it for me, right? Because a lot of the things that I do for and in my work, we experience it. A lot of the practices when we talk about brain body approaches are experiential. It's not necessarily manualized where we have to remember certain techniques. Of course, the techniques are there, but it's also this thing that we have to experience in order to understand the practice, not only the theory, but the practice of it. So just for myself, I have used it for a part of my self-care regimen. It's just, it's what I do weekly, sometimes daily. I use it for sleep hygiene. Just, getting ready for bed. I also use it in between my sessions because it's, some of the work that we do is sometimes heavy. And that doesn't mean that we don't necessarily like it. It just means that, every job has, what I like to call the hazards of what we do. No different from, Simone Biles having, the hazard of, spraining her hamstring when she's, training for the Olympics, right? We also can have that vicarious trauma. So I use that throughout the day. Now, for my patients, I use it in many different ways. I use it in conjunction or as a complement to either talk therapy, brain spotting, also internal family system. Sometimes I use it with CBT. I don't use CBT a ton, but it's, it is part of my background, most therapists' background. So I use it as a complement. Sometimes I use it as a standalone. So we will use TRE as an entire session. Sometimes I am getting into, I have done just several of them, but getting into using more intensives where I incorporate multiple interventions over a 2 or 3 day period. If someone is wanting to concentrate on a specific existential kind of presentation like the pandemic or retirement, midlife crisis, anything that's coming up like that, or even a specific event or traumatic event that has happened. So those are a couple of ways that I use TRE. Yeah. Just for myself and then also for my patients. I know that was a mouthful, but
very much so. And it's very similar to what Shelley and I were talking about, which you'll have heard this one before, is about how we use our practice therapy, such as brain spotting and such, for ourselves as well before we even use it with our clients. So we're not basically working with our clients without something that we have actually also gone through.
Right. And I will tell you too, Perry, I don't feel that that's traditional, right? No. Traditional is we learn techniques and we learn a theory of it. And then we go and, we practice, and people that's why it's called practice, practitioners, that's the basis of it. When we're getting into working with trauma and the interventions, we want to be able to understand and embody the practice. And so that has helped me embody TRE by using it. Very
much so. Which and we're not going to get segued too deeply on it, but just that nature of the history of what and where the field of mental health comes from, which grew out of biological practice and is centered around the sort of doctor-patient relationship, which often becomes that standpoint of, I come to you, tell you what's wrong, you tell me what to do.
Right.
And there are even some that it's expected culturally of that as well. But how many of us, especially as people of color, have to deal with that relationship is like, that can't work. It can also be in that aspect of how it robs us of our own agency.
Oh, I was just thinking the same thing. I was like, oh, we're tuned. That's true. People, we are our best kind of experts of our body and how we experience everything. And so, folks come to us, because we have experience in understanding patterns of symptoms that happen, and we know interventions that we can try to see if those are effective. And at the same time, we're not experts over someone else's experience or how trauma is settling in their body, but we can give them our feedback. And when we work together, in this collaborative approach, that's where true healing can happen. Not to say that it didn't happen like before this started to kind of transition in therapy. It just happens, more effectively and efficiently, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and equally in that is that we also we're not taking responsibility for your choices.
Right. We're not taking that away. Right. How important is agency and self-determination in healing and wellness? It's huge. It's huge. Yeah.
And so with that agency, when you have somebody who's come to work with you, what are some of the issues that you have been addressing with your clients, and what's been some of the effect you can talk about without breaking confidentiality?
Oh, sure. I would say more, specifically right now, it has been the pandemic. When folks show up to the office, they don't say that the pandemic, I'm overwhelmed by the pandemic. It's usually other sets of, issues where, things are very overwhelming for me. I don't have the capacity or bandwidth to be present in other people's life like I used to. I don't have the capacity or bandwidth to be present in my life. I check out a lot. I don't have motivation to get things done. Not motivated at work, distant and isolated from family members and friends. So people are not necessarily saying the pandemic, but as you and I know, like those are things that usually come from being in a freeze, kind of a freeze response, with the stress cycle. People have been in fight or flight. Like that happened a long time ago. That happened like the early part of 2020. And then, our systems just got overwhelmed, and some of us, continue to kind of be in that freeze response. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing, regarding the pandemic. Regarding the populations that I work with, I work with women of color, a fair amount of Black women who are, working in professional capacities, education. And so I, work with a lot of kind of the work stressors and racial traumas that tend to happen on a daily basis, with microaggressions and macroaggressions, and how that has affected them. How Black Lives Matter has affected people of color, right? Because I like to say in my practice that Black Lives Matter didn't only affect people of color. White folks. White folks of course had to get woke, but Black folks had to deal with white folks being woke, right? We've never had to deal with with our people in general on that level. And so that's some of the capacity that I work with when people are coming to my office. They don't necessarily say it per se, but with our experience and the training that we have, we understand that certain symptoms that folks are coming with, what that tends to be. And so I work with some work related racial traumas. Yeah.
So what does that kind of look like if somebody's having a typical TRE experience with you?
Yeah,
or for yourself?
So I can explain both. So if someone, I would explain it this way, and it'll kind of give it a little bit more context. So if someone is coming in and they may be having, they love what they do. They've gone to school. They've put in the training and the investment of a career that they enjoy, and they get to a job, and boom, they're having to address, our dominant culture, white culture, minimizing their work, stealing their work, ignoring them, minimizing on so many, different levels. I could go on and on about that. Right. And so how that tends to happen is, when we face that, at the people of color, when we face that in the workplace, we do go into a fight or flight, right? Because it has to do with how we take care of ourselves, how we present. We need to keep those jobs in order to survive for the most part. And so our body goes into this fight or flight, right? As a result, anytime we're going into fight or flight, our body is going into tension. And when our body goes into tension, that sets us up for stuck stress being in our connective tissue or our fascia, right? And if we don't find a way to get that out, then that becomes presented as neck tension, shoulder tension, tension in our shoulder girdle, pelvic girdle, different areas that way. And so, when folks come in, they're not only talking about their tension, because that's one of the things that I talk about when we do brain body approaches, but they're also talking about difficulty sleeping, loss of appetite, loss of motivation, isolation. And so when they come in, we will talk about different interventions that we will do. And depending on how severe or how present it is for them, I may do an entire session. I may do a combination of brain spotting and TRE. We may do a little bit of parts work and, get on the floor, allow them to tremor and maybe identify the part that is coming up. It can look a variety of ways. Now, depending on what that session looks like, my body may tremor and, sometime during that session. When you get to the point where you're using TRE and you tremor on a regular basis, your body will just start to tremor. Not uncontrollably. So I don't want people to be scared, but your body will just you'll get a little, sometimes what I'll do, my body will be like, ooh, it'll shiver just a little bit or move, or my shoulders will move, or I'll feel this little energy on my right side. And the only thing that does is lets me know you're really attuned with this person. And it's not really a terrible thing. What I do is I go into this sense of appreciation of thank you for letting me know that my body doesn't really want to keep this stress in a certain way. It doesn't really want to store it in my connective tissue. It really wants to discharge it. And so, that's what it looks like. Someone will come in with their presentation. I will use my skills and, the best way that I see fit, and, in collaboration with them, talking with them, getting their sense of how it resonates with them. And if I'm impacted by it in any way, which is a natural thing, I expect to be impacted by it. We can't do the work that we do without being impacted by it. The biggest thing is that we need to be able to have tools and across all health professionals, and really all professionals, because teachers are not health professionals and they're really experiencing this pandemic in a different way. So it's going to happen. We just need to make sure we have a cache or a toolbox of kind of interventions to be able to use them. So hopefully that gave a kind of a umbrella view of, how what it looks like from maybe a patient's perspective, and also how it may impact a therapist. Yeah.
Well, as you're describing it, and especially the shake, it makes me think about the work, I think it's by Siegel, about why don't zebras have ulcers?
Right.
I think he's the one who created that work from that standpoint of after the zebra has been chased down and escaped the lion or the hyena or leopard and such, or cheetah, that massive shaking they go through before they return to the herd. And it sounds like this is in its own way, and I'm not saying that's what it is, but it's a similarity in a response.
It is. It's a response of our kind of our mammalian part of our brain that works to, recover, or a recovery response, if you will, to the stress response. And to bring that a little bit closer to home. If we have pets in our home, we've noticed that our pets shake all the time. They just shake. We'll hear their collar just shaking somewhere. they're shaking to just discharge, the things that happen in their mammals. And so this is a mammalian, just a typical mammalian response. If our body has created a way to respond to stress, you best believe it's also created a way to recover from it. We just need to give it, or as Dr. David Berceli of TRE, the founder of TRE says, we need to give it a chance. We need to give our bodies a chance to be able to do that. So, but it is very similar to that. Why zebras don't have ulcers.
Right. Well, I think that also gets into a deeper and larger conversation, which we don't have to have here, but something that I remind clients, when I'm working with them, especially around the subject of fight, flight, and freeze and anxiety, is that no matter everything that we have built in this world, we are still basically animals.
Yes, we are.
We've gotten
we're at the top of the food chain, but we are.
Well, whether we're at the top of the food chain or where we sit in the web of the world, we do, just because we have this ability to use tools and build this world around us, does not mean we are not also connected to the animal kingdom.
Absolutely.
We are part of that kingdom, not at the top of it. So if those
I like that frame. Thank you for reframing that. Yes, we are
part of that kingdom. Yeah. The difference is we're not holding up Simba here for a Lion King and all of that. But that system is still within us. Yeah. And it is. And that, I think, also ties into talking about the idea of, which we'll go to break after this, is when we talk about the idea of the brain body or the bottom up, what is that? Because I'm sure there's some people listening who are asking, what does this mean?
Yeah, it's very kind of direct, simple, without going into a lot of brain talk. We tend to use from a top down approach. What that means is we tend to think and respond often from our prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of our brain. As we're, digging into more of the research, we're finding that the back of our brainstem, our cerebellum, that's connected to, our body movements, is stronger and I guess maybe more responsive than our prefrontal cortex. And so this is a bottom up approach. And this is the case because not only does our prefrontal cortex has memory, but also our body has memory when things happen. And so that our brainstem, is of course connected to, it's part of our nervous system, connected to our spinal cord and column, and all of that in the back, and that is connected to our body and connective tissue. And so that on a whole is how, when we talk about a bottom up approach, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about how much more smarter and responsive the bottom part of our brain is, because it's connected to those reflexes, those bodies, that body memory, than it is our prefrontal cortex. It's the sensing part of our brain, and we take in more through our body than we process out through our brain. That makes sense. And so that means that a lot of the work that needs to be done is really from a body perspective versus a thinking perspective, which traditional talk therapy is about. Let's think this through, let's process this, let's use as much executive functioning as we can. And, in the last 10 years or so, we've learned that a lot of it is really coming through the body. So.
And going back to what I was saying earlier about where did our idea of both physical health and mental health go? It came from an idea of rationalizing everything. Right. That idea of what some call king brain. And the fact of the matter is, brain was one of the last things that got developed as we are today. Our bodies got developed far faster than the brain did. So the fact of working with that sensory system, which frankly, and I know I've used this when I'm talking to clients about brain spotting, the sensory inputs pass through the brainstem, the midbrain, as well as the frontal lobe. Yeah. The frontal lobe is essentially the last stop.
Yep, it is.
So there's at least two other areas that have gotten more information and gotten these signals before they've even gotten to this point where our brains analyze and make sense of that, or at least the sense of the data we make nowadays versus,
Absolutely.
again, that base of us that is still animal.
Right. And to put this like in even different, which we definitely, it's outside of the scope of what we're talking about today, very much connected to, but the thinking part of our brain, that left part of our brain is very much connected to capitalism and, white culture, white supremacy, all of that, like how that has, how that has developed in specifically the United States, but also all over. And so we value the thinking, right? And so because we value that part of our, the brain, the left part of the brain, we tend to leave out how smart our bodies are. Like we sweat when we get nervous, right? We shake when we're afraid. We don't want people to see it, but we shake when we're afraid. We get thirsty. We have all of these things that happen with our body that we tend to try to reason or rationalize out. Yeah.
So I think that's a good place for us to break for the moment. So we'll be back shortly with Alexis Overstreet on Untangle. Not you, Alexa. Stop it, Alexa. Don't want her talking. Do not want that talking right now.
She will be all up in your business. Okay.
Yep. So we're going to go and take a break here, and we'll be back with Alexis Overstreet shortly on Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered.
Our lives and the world around us can get messy and frustrating. Untangle and Grow Counseling's focus is to untangle that mess and make sense of it so you have a good foundation to build and grow from. Visit us on the web at untangleandgrowcounseling.com. Perry Clark offers individual psychotherapy, couples and family therapy, and adolescence therapy from a variety of coping materials and resources. Visit untangleandgrowcounseling.com for more information.
It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed. VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com.
Welcome to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered with Perry Clark. This program looks at mental health from unique perspectives and shows you how to manage your life by finding the knots that help you and stay away from the ones that could be a disadvantage. Now, here is your host, Perry Clark.
Welcome back, everyone. And we are here talking with Alexis Overstreet, Master Clinical Social Worker, on talking about TRE, which is trauma release exercises. And we just had a very fascinating discussion about talking about what it means for a brain body or bottom up approach. And one of those other elements that comes with that is the aspect of co-regulation. And co-regulation is something that in many ways, and I'll let Alexis go deeper into it, we're constantly doing all the time. And it's even something, especially with everything we've done with the pandemic, and when people have been stuck at home with either family members that they're used to being gone most of the day from, or sadly, ones that are also responsible for causing trauma for them, there's a struggle to co-regulate.
Yeah, that's very true. Oftentimes, I think we talk about self-regulation. I know in some of the tools we use, how can you get to that place of self-regulation? The beautiful thing about TRE, in addition to it being a self-care tool, is when we use it in a therapeutic sense, or in therapy or in conjunction with therapy, we are, number one, giving a tool to patients in order to be able to use, but we're allowing them to be able to discharge that in a place where they can co-regulate. And when we say co-regulate, we're basically saying that your nervous system, because our nervous systems are always connecting to each other. I like to think of it as that the movie, oh, what was the name of that movie? Avatar, where they connected. You remember how the tails like connected?
Yeah, we're talking about the James Cameron one, not the animated one.
Okay, yes. Yes, you have to get me straight on that because I know that is like your whole thing. But yes, it's that I like to, to have that visual. I like to say that often, but we are always connecting. And so when we say co-regulation, it means that my nervous system is coming to a place of regulation, into, out of, fight or flight, into a place, and where I'm doing that with someone who can support it, right? With someone who's not also in fight or flight, with someone who is what we call in, maybe ventral vagal, someone who is more grounded. And so when we say co-regulation, that's really key. We're always looking to co-regulate. Sometimes we are co-regulating with someone who is not necessarily grounded or, in ventral vagal. So that's what co-regulation means, that we're able to support that regulation with someone who is more grounded.
And when you say ventral vagal, we're talking about the nervous system here.
We are, yes.
And for those wondering, and ventral is usually meaning the back, if I remember correctly, the descriptor directors. So that would connect also in with that nervous system that's going into the brain, into the midbrain and the amygdala, and into ultimately the frontal lobe.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, in the time we have here, is there any way you can give us like a small snippet of TRE, just so that we can just sort of have a taste of it?
Absolutely. So what I typically like to do is, depending on if I am using it with brain spotting or another intervention, I like to just kind of talk about maybe what is coming up for an individual. If I'm using it in conjunction with therapy, if I'm using it because maybe someone is presenting, or either maybe I'm having just feeling out of sorts, or feeling, like stressed, overwhelmed, just pulled, very tightly. I may just get on the floor, right? So there are two ways that you can definitely come from an issue if you're coming from a therapeutic approach. But typical TRE, which, Dr. David Berceli has done this in multiple groups. You really don't need context to be able to do TRE, because the body knows what it needs to do. We just need to give space in order to do it. So I'll take it from a traditional approach. So what we do is we do a series of exercises. It's about 7 of them. And these exercises are meant to, as I said before, stress or fatigue, if you will, or stretch the body, starting at the nerve endings on the soles of the feet and going all the way up to the psoas. And the psoas is a really important muscle, because it's kind of that muscle that's responsible for the fight or flight. It's is connected, kind of goes, into that hip bone, is connected to the top part of the femur. And so it really is responsible for that lunging, if you need to fight, or that running, if you need to get away. And so that's really, it kind of focuses, the stretches and exercises focuses on, the muscles, moving up toward that area.
And these are up in the hip and waist area, so that people are wondering where this is. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, because that would be the mechanism that if we are, like you said, leaning, and if we're leaning into something, or if we're running, how aerodynamic we are. Right.
How we can get away. And this is the area that we tend to hold, a lot of attention in our pelvic girdle. And so we will do those exercises. The last part of the exercise ends on the floor, on our back, with, our front part of our body facing the ceiling. And we'll do certain exercises to get to a point where our body is doing some natural, spontaneous tremoring. And yes, it just really depends on how your body responds. I've seen people go into very vigorous shaking. I've seen some like humming that happens, small vibrations. It really just depends on what's happening. And I like to say that this is your body communicating to you. So we want to really be in a place where you're listening to it. So it is mindfulness 101. Like if you've never had mindfulness before or never been able to be mindful, I've had that in my office. You have no choice because your body is moving and you're like, this is interesting. Like I promise you, I'm not trying to do this. Like people are convincing me I'm really not doing this on purpose, right? The body just knows what to do. We just have to give it a chance. And so we go through that process, and towards the end, we like to integrate it. And so we turn on our side, and integration is really basically means that we want the front part of our brain to catch up to what just happened, because remember, our body is much smarter. And so the beautiful thing about TRE is that we're allowing our body to discharge, and at the same time, the front part of our brain is witnessing it. And so we have this integration that happens. And so we turn on our side, and then, we sit up and then we process. That's what a typical session would look like. Either in a group or individual session, because you can do it in a group. So, yeah.
And that's beautiful to know, because there are some people who, in that aspect of the co-regulation, might feel more comfortable doing this in a group. Just as equally, there are some people who will feel more comfortable doing this individually.
Right. Correct.
So no one way it has to be done that way. You're just looking to make sure you're advocating for which is the best for you.
Absolutely. And I encourage, haven't gotten to that point, but I would love, letting my folks and, people know that you can even do this in families. You can do this as couples, right? And co-regulate your systems and allow your systems to discharge together. It's a beautiful way to just, allow greater communication with your body, and then also greater communication and co-regulation with, the people in your life.
All righty. So now we move into our last section, which is myths and realities. So talking about the ideas about the myths and realities we have around mental health. And I know one of the popular topics and responses has been talking about access to therapy. So what are your thoughts? What are some of the myths and the realities that go along with them when it comes to mental health for people of color?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think just historically, like the pandemic, I keep talking about the pandemic, but it really has changed just about every category of our life in so many different ways. But when we talk about access to therapy in general for people of color, I think the myth and also reality, I think it may be, 50 is that we don't have access to that, right? Either if it's because of our viewpoint or perspective or culture, interpretation of what therapy is, financial means, that we don't have access to it. And so it is a myth, right? Because we do have access. We have had access. We have had, people of color, cultures of color access therapy. And on the same note, it's, it is also a reality when you think about, some of the perspectives that we have held, about what therapy is and, and if it's accessible to us, and how it is inaccessible because of placeholders, even in our lives and our cultures, such as church, and how we've used that to heal in the past. And, that may have been enough at a certain point, and that may have, been a reality that, maybe that has cut off, access to therapy. Now it's just a little bit different just because of generational awareness that's happening and knowledge and what healing and wellness is. So I would say it's probably about a 50-50. I think it holds when we talk about access to therapy. I don't want to give off from my perspective that therapy hasn't been available. That is a myth. And it's just a reality because we have been more connected to other avenues of healing and wellness in our lives. And that just hasn't been a part of how I can speak for myself, Black folks heal. Right. Even when we think about, church and historical church, I grew up in, Southern Baptist, we had this song that was called Shake the Devil Off. Right. And, shake, 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 boom, boom, shake the devil off. And, we had the tambourine going and all of that. And me personally, I relate that to TRE. It wasn't TRE per se. It was a different way that we went about allowing that body to discharge some of those stressors that we went through as Black folk, and just, living our day to day, trying to work and live in, a world and a society that really didn't support us thriving.
And as you talk about that, is that standpoint of whether it's Shake the Devil Off or TRE, it's talking about the brain body based therapy versus this image, and we say traditional, of talk therapy, which sadly many of us are basically trained in, and we've had to go beyond.
Yes, it's full circle, right? We're coming back to it. We're we're coming back to it. I don't know any other way to say that. Yeah.
And so how do you, in some ways you probably already answered it, but how do you feel TRA is friendly towards people of color?
I think that it's, I would say that it's double-edged, right? Because TRE, shaking in general, tremoring, shaking, moving spontaneously has just been, pathologized and, just in general in our culture. It's not okay to shake. It's not okay to perceive or, look like you are weak or out of control or fearful. Even though we may be exploding on the inside, we're going to be cool, calm, and collective on the outside, because that's how we've had to survive as people of color in white culture. And so I will say it's a little bit double-edged. I'm a weird therapist. I tell my patients all the time, this is weird. I know it's weird. We're navigating in weird because weirdness gets you to healing and wellness. And so it can feel a little like you're out of control because of the pathology related to shaking, tremoring. Usually when people have, PTSD or anxiety, that's not a good feeling. And because of that, and because the body is already discharging, they do feel this sense of like wanting to shake. And what typically happens is people pull that in and try to hold it down, right? They try to control it. And it becomes kind of this negative thing that you don't want people to see. And so I will say for like people of color that it can feel that you're losing control. At the same time, the beautiful thing is that you're learning how to communicate and connect with your body in a way that it's designed to do. So hopefully that answered your question.
Ultimately, it still connects with that aspect of what are we connecting with? Whether it is the divine, whether it is our mind, or ultimately it's connecting with our body and trusting the wisdom that each one has, that all of them can have when working together. Absolutely. I think our bodies are, the divine. Even if you want to take it from the sense of, if your faith centers around, around the Bible, that, which I know everyone doesn't, but if I take my perspective from the history that I grew up in, the Bible says we were made in God's image. Like, if you want to take that, like, literally, if that means that our bodies are made in God's image, like, that means how powerful must we be? Right? Regardless of, what, spiritual framework you come from, I believe our bodies are the divine. And the more we find out about that, it's almost like our bodies are space, or the universe, right? We're finding little by little, especially when we think about connective tissue and the role that connective tissue and the science behind the fascia that that's our body. So right. I could probably talk a lot about that. Oh, I'm sure. Maybe that needs to be a number 2 episode.
Maybe so. Yeah.
But I want to thank you very much for coming and talking on this program. And where can people find you if they want to learn more about this?
Well, they can, right now, I have a website which is geared towards my therapy practice, and working with to develop another website for the wellness piece of this. If anyone is interested in doing any intensives or corporate work, educational work around releasing the trauma from the pandemic, you can go to my website, which is www.metaspacecounseling.com, and Metaspace is spelled METASPACE, counseling.com.
All righty.
Yeah.
So, Alexis, thank you again.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
And looking forward to more of this. And so this is, I'm Perry Clark. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and this has been Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered on the Voice of America Network. So stay tuned and ultimately have happy holidays, guys.
Thank you for tuning in for Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. Be sure to join your host, Perry Clark, for another episode on the podcast coming soon on the Voice America Empowerment Channel.